This Titan Thundercrash build obliterates everything. You're going to be running around melting bosses and champions with your super, while getting that super much faster. You'll be able to get your abilities back faster, and overall make endgame PvE much easier as a solo player, with insane damage being dealt by you. Now previously I went over a similar setup with this build as a maxed out ability build using the Heart of Inmost Light, but with this one today we're going to be using the Cuirass of the Falling Star to maximise our boss damage with Thundercrash. And guys, I will have a dim link down below if you want to directly copy the build, but I will also go over the full setup and what the best choices are to use and pair with this build later in the video, so stay tuned. Be sure to leave a rating, comment, subscribe and share for more, and now let's bring in that Thundercrash. So in the last two Titan builds we covered the Arc ability build, which is really good for ad clearing, but we also covered the Titan's Infinite Restoration Laurelly build, which is the best build in the game for survivability. But now with this one today we're going to be covering the Titan Arc Thundercrash build to maximise your damage with that super in endgame PvE. And by the way guys, if you like these builds and you want to see more like this, then I will leave a link down below to the full collection of new and updated builds in the playlist for season 18. So you guys can go ahead and check that out later, but essentially how this build works is you'll first start by generating an Arc Elemental well by getting a grenade kill. This will improve the super's regen while giving you ability energy back from Ionic Traces. You'll then punch an ad to kill them, which will make you amplified, resulting in additional buffs. And this doesn't have to be activated by your powered ability, but you also want to use your class ability near enemies to evade, and this will generate us super energy and refund ability energy. Then you'll go around on a killing spree with bad juju to get your super even faster, while spawning in void wells, orbs, and arc wells. Once you have your super, you'll kill an ad with your melee to become amplified, or become critically wounded, and then activate your super on a boss to deal a stupid amount of damage, which will either insta-kill them or cause some serious damage. Honestly, there's a lot to this build, but it's so easy to use and it's really effective for solo players who play endgame PvE, where you just want to quickly take down a boss or champion guaranteed without any risk of dying. Now using your Thundercrash on a boss without Cuirass and Thunderous Retort will result in dealing, I'm going to say, around 200,000 damage. Using your super with Cuirass will result in dealing twice the initial damage, being an extra 100% increase in damage, and using Cuirass with Thunderous Retort will result in dealing almost 500,000 damage. Now these tests were done on our usual testing boss here in the Lost Sector over on Nessus, so damage will change depending on the activity you do and the power that you currently are for that given activity. But for reference, Thundercrash with Cuirass will provide you with a 100% damage increase, while Thunderous Retort will give you a 30% damage increase. Now stack those buffs together and you got, let's just say, a pretty big damage increase. Now I ain't good with maths, I never have been, but if you want the actual figures, then I will leave a link to two really good spreadsheets down below, which will have all the damage buffs, debuffs, and all that good stuff. If you want to make your builds the most efficient as possible, to be as powerful as you can be, without running the risk of stacking buffs and debuffs that don't actually stack, and end up making your damage worse due to more buffs, then better. Now I've used this build in both a Legend and Master Lost Sector, the Master one being while under the recommended power level, and I have to say both performed really well. I never personally really had any issues, but of course if you're running around with a kinetic weapon like bad juju in a master activity, it is going to be less effective than being in something like a strike for example, because you're just not going to go on a killing spree as fast as you can in an easier activity, which will then result in you getting your super back much slower, but it will still help you get it faster by using it than not using it at all. So we will be running a bad juju with this build, as this will increase the super energy you get on kills with the String of Curses exotic trait. If you're happy with getting your super a little slower, then you can freely run whatever you prefer, it's completely down to personal preference. But as for the other weapons, like your energy one and the heavy one, I'd be using something that is going to benefit you in the activity. Like for me, the Lost Sector I did had a solar burn modifier, so I used solar weapons while covering the correct champion mods that were needed. In an ideal situation though, you would use Arc special weapons so that you can make the build better, as they pair well with the subclass fragments that we're going to be using, which also benefit you getting your super faster, because we'll be chaining abilities that benefit each other in different ways. As for the subclass, we're going to be using the Titan's Arc Striker Subclass with the Thundercrash Super, which deals really good damage. One of the best damaging supers in the game, alongside a Blade Barrage, Mobius Quiver, and a Gathering Storm. It's actually funny that hunters have the best super abilities at the moment, but our class ability will be the new Thruster, really fun ability. The Strike melee ability so that we can blind enemies. I prefer to use this one, but you guys can use whatever you prefer, like the new Thunderclap ability, which actually does clap. I mean, it's not even funny, it's really powerful. But the grenade I have is the Pulse one, and then the aspects I'm using are Touch of Winter, This will improve our grenades, which will make our pulse grenades generate ionic traces, as it damages the targets and increases damage over time. Really good aspect to use, but you want to use the grenades on both adds and bosses though. The second aspect is knockout. This is so that defeating an enemy with our melee will start health regen, but more importantly, make us amplified. You don't have to use this, but if you don't, then you will want to make sure that you have another source of easily becoming amplified. For the fragments though, we have Spark of Recharge. While critically wounded, your melee and grenade energy recharge more quickly. Spark of Magnitude, your arc grenades basically last longer, at least for the pulse one anyway. Spark of Resistance, while surrounded, you are more resistant to incoming damage. And then Spark of Beacons, while you are amplified, your arc special weapon final blows create a blinding explosion. If you're not using arc special weapons, or you don't want to use this, then that's fine. I'd swap this out to something like a Spark of Shock to jolt enemies with grenades instead. For the class stat, you really want to invest into getting Discipline to 100, as well as Resilience if you can, as those are the two abilities that will help you the most with getting your super faster. But of course, this is a super build, so intellect is also an important choice, but personally I wouldn't waste stat mods in the armor on that stat, as the mods we are using will in turn make up for the lost intellect anyway. Moving to the exotic, we have Cuirass of the Falling Star. Previously we did use Heart of Inmost Light in our other build, which was used for a strong ability ad clearing build. So if you would rather use that, you can, but I'd recommend going with the other setup, which I have linked down below in the playlist. So with this one today, we're going to be using the Cuirass of the Falling Star, and what this does is greatly increase your Thundercrash's impact damage, while also giving you an overshield at the end. Really good exotic, and it's always been one of my favourites to use inside of endgame PvE, if I ever run the Arc subclass on a Titan when playing solo. As for the main mods, first up we have Reaping Wellmaker. This will spawn in Void Wells when we use our class ability and then get a weapon kill. Then using that Void Well, we will get damage resistance from Well of Tenacity. If you're someone who watches a lot of my build videos, you'll know that I use this in almost every build because it's just so strong, giving you that extra 40% damage reduction from adds. So I strongly recommend you always have those two mods in, for not just this build, but for every build. But the next one we have is Elemental Ordnance to spawn in Arc Wells with our grenades, and then we'll use that Arc Well on Font of Wisdom for increased super regen. And this will increase your intellect to tier 10 for 10 seconds, which is why having intellect at tier 10 is just not needed. As for the normal mods, back in the helmet we have Dynamo to reduce its super cooldown when using our class ability near enemies. This will be a 3% reduction. Then a Kinetic Siphon so that we can generate orbs for extra super energy with our bad juju. In the gauntlets we have our champion mods that we need if you do need any. Otherwise throw on a grenade kickstart instead. Then for the chest armor we have our damage resist mods, which will be the new main artifact one, Thermo Shock Plating. In the legs we have our scavenger mod for our heavy weapon, along with better already to trigger health regen when picking up all those orbs generated by bad juju. And then lastly in the class, we have utility kickstart to get some extra energy back for our class ability after using it, along with the new Thunderous Retort artifact mod to increase your super's damage by 30%. This is one of the best artifact mods in the game, and definitely worth using. You can use some of the other mods if you want to, although I thought Thunderous was the best choice, as we are a max super DPS build, but it is worth having a play around with anyway, if you want to modify your build slightly. Now overall I do like this build a lot, and this is my main Titan build that I use when playing as an Arc subclass on the Titan, but if I had to choose a build between this and a Laurelly Restoration build, I'd say it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a solo flawless master activity, sure, go with Laurelly, but if you're doing a master raid or a master 6-player activity, or just any activity solo that has tough bosses but is easier to survive in, then I'd go with this one with the Thundercrash. It's all down to playstyle, how you want to use the build, and where it would be most effective, because like you wouldn't use this on Oryx in the King's Fall raid, but then you would use this for damage on something like a dungeon boss. So it all depends on what you're doing, but overall a really good build, especially for solo players who want to melt bosses like a boss. So give this one a try and let me know what you think, or what your setup is for the Titan Thundercrash this season. But guys, that about wraps up this build video for the new Titan Thundercrash build for Arc 3.0 in Destiny 2 Witch Queen Season of Plunder. Next, as always, don't forget to check out the full playlist of new and updated builds this season for Season 18, as I do create them weekly here on the channel. And whatever you guys get up to, keep grinding, keep Thundercrashing. Be sure to leave a cheeky rating on the video and subscribe if you want to keep up to date with the latest news, important PSAs and new builds. And I'll see you awesome peeps soon for the next build video.